I need not pause to say how very delighted I am to be here this morning. This is a question facing America. Ultimately, a great nation is a compassionate nation. America has not met its obligations and its responsibilities. The poor.
In terms of the disparities in the facilities, one of the things that I have found in my conversations with various community members and different stakeholders across the spectrum is that a lot of people have no idea how bad it is. How bad it is in some places and how good it is in other places. I don't want to deny the fact that right now, a lot of our kids are getting subpar opportunities in their educational experiences, but I don't think it's a testament to the character and the potential of the district. What we see happening are huge disparities in dollars and allocated resources that are available within the district.
This is a story about America, a story about Kansas City, a story about schools, about children, families. It's also about money, judges, laws, and who holds the key to actually making change. But hopefully, this is a story of hope for a future we all create together.
After the Civil War, you have the Reconstruction, and that's where you have the first schools established for freed men.
We know that coming out of the period here in America, what we call the Ma'afa, the period after emancipation, slaves were considered someone's property. They didn't have human value. So the whole notion was to build schools from the ground up that the community controlled and the community created. They were called race schools. They were called native schools. They were called bush schools. They were called pit schools. So these schools, literally with the pennies of the emancipated freedmen, were built from the ground up. And the active ownership was that the community felt like these were schools that they created.
Schools are not where you regurgitate information, right? That's not what schooling is for. And even when you look at the first universities, right, which were in countries where our ancestors came from, it was about thought, thinking about complex problems and being in a room with other people thinking about complex problems, thinking about life, thinking about nature, thinking about earth, thinking about relationships, right? And it somehow morphed into something else.
In the late 19th into the early 20th century, around, I would say 1890s, you have an influx of money, right? Working class people have money, middle class people have money, upper class people have money, and that includes black people.
Right. Oftentimes, there's this narrative that you have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
During segregation, blacks did pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. You have black-owned banks, you have black insurance companies, you have black movie theaters, you have blacks that were involved in the policy racket.
And as a result, they had excellent teachers. They had excellent schools. They were fully funded, and children were producing according to that excellence.
Right. The Lincoln High School that we know of today is located at 2111 Woodland. That Lincoln High School was built in 1935. Before that, Lincoln High School was located at 1835 Tracy. Up until 1935, black African-American activists had advocated for a new school because Lincoln High School was, first of all, in a bad neighborhood and it was overcrowded. In 1935, they finally built a new school for blacks. Formerly, that site where the new Lincoln High School was built had been the home site of Dr. Isaac Ridge, and it was referred to where his home was. He had a stately home. They would refer to his home as the Castle on the Hill. Then when they tore his home down and built the new Lincoln High School, it was also referred to as the Castle on the Hill.
But once you stop, then we start to see.
And when did the stop occur?
I would say for Kansas City, it actually pushed a little bit further. So we were shielded from the Great Depression under Pendergrass quite a bit. So I would say in Kansas City, you start to see it in the 1940s. So you have this period from about I put it about 1942 all the way up through Brown versus Board of Education, where schools are trying to maintain this kind of Black excellence within these segregated schools, but they don't have the money. So they start to fall behind right there, right? So you have your Black schools, you have your white schools, you have teachers go to teaching academies where they kind of go together, but you have the schools segregated, and that is very expensive, right? So if you have your white high school, and then you have your Black high school, and then you have your white primary school, and then all of those things cost money. And so it breaks into the economy very quickly.
Also around the same time, you have in 1948, you have the Shelley versus Kramer case. And so with the Shelley versus Kramer case, restrictive covenants were no longer enforceable, and that allowed Blacks to move into neighborhoods that they had previously been prohibited from. Real estate agents would then go around and alert white homeowners that a Black person moved into their neighborhood or on their block, and whites would then be compelled to short sell their home at whatever value that they thought that they could get. The schools that were built to serve those neighborhoods were a reflection of those neighborhoods. And so as those neighborhoods transitioned from Black to white, in a matter of some cases 10 to 15 years, those schools did the same thing. For instance, Paseo may have been like 90% white. Then you look at Paseo in 1971, by that time is 97% Black. So it's a total flip-flop. This was not just at Paseo, also at Central, Southeast. Black students had to be bused into Southwest. But the neighborhood demographic of Southwest never changed because it's located west of Troost. Those properties, they had deeds attached to them that contained restrictive covenants that stated if you purchase this property, you cannot rent or sell to a Negro or a Jew. And Southwest High School was located within the Brookside neighborhood, and so also Border Star Elementary School.
Back in the 50s and 60s growing up, we lived in segregated neighborhoods. Central at the time was 99.9% Black. I lived in an all-Black neighborhood, went to an all-Black church, and the only time I saw someone white was at a baseball game. I mean, I could just walk a few blocks and visit with Satchel Paige's kids who were my classmates. We didn't worry about integration because we were confident in our abilities to succeed as individual entrepreneurs, business people, and professionals. I never felt that I couldn't do anything. I mean, there was no limitation to where I could go. All the teachers, Black and the white teachers, seem invested in our future. There was never any racial component that we had to discuss. I don't recall ever having a racist teacher. Mr. Hayes was my chemistry teacher, and I remember one day, I belonged to the camera club, and he pulled up a negative. He said, if you look at this negative, everything that's Black is white, and everything that's white is Black. I'm like, man, that's heavy.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense that we have racism in this country.
Yeah, when it's all just a trick of the eye.
Yes, it's all visual. Great chemistry teacher, and when you came to class late, he would always have the same comment, "You're drunk again."
This thing, Black genius or Black excellence, I feel like I'm, understanding more where it comes from. Just the baseline, if you graduated, you already had this legacy of participation and inclusion and whatnot.
I never thought I would fail. I should have said that on camera.
You still on camera.
Oh. That never entered my mind. It may take me a little bit longer, but where am I at here? See how nerdy I look?
Yeah, you look really handsome. Come on now.
I wasn't going to date anybody. I am Larry Lester, class of 1967, the mighty Blue Eagles, state champions, and I am a successful return on the investment.
After 1969, the Kansas City, Missouri School District did not receive any additional funding. And so the schools were left in disrepair. Okay, so you have windows falling out the panes. The kids couldn't bring food to school because of rodents. The halls were urine infested. There was, because the plumbing wasn't right in the schools. The roofs of the school buildings were leaking. Since blacks couldn't get a competitive education, black people could either stay in their neighborhoods and send their kids to private school, or they can move out to Raytown, Hickman Mills, Grandview, and send their kids to suburban schools. And so you have black flight occurring.
My interest in Missouri versus Jenkins started with a class on intergovernmental relations. I was taking it at the University of Virginia with Martha Durthick, and I wanted to do a presentation on theoretical treatment of federalism. Talked to Martha in her office and said, this is what I want to do a presentation on, and she looked at me and she said, Josh, if you present on that, you'll make me fall asleep. Didn't know what to present on, but Martha gave me the suggestion. She said, why don't you look at this case, Missouri versus Jenkins? There has to be something interesting there. So I'm Josh Dunn. I'm the director of the Institute of American Civics at the University of Tennessee. I'm the author of Complex Justice, the case of Missouri versus Jenkins. I think the first thing that stood out to me was that there was so much money spent to accomplish two objectives. One was to increase integration, to draw white students from the suburbs, and then the second was to improve the quality of education in this Kansas City, Missouri school district for the students who are already there, and it didn't succeed on either of those. After Brown versus Board of Education was handed down in 1954, Kansas City was held up as a model for how to respond to the decision. Actually, Kansas City and St. Louis were held up as models. Time magazine, for instance, said, hey, this is going to be easy. Let's just look, if we just do what Kansas City and St. Louis did, we're going to have desegregation very quickly. And it turned out that Kansas City and St. Louis had the two most expensive desegregation plans in history.
There was a case that was made. They examined and looked at the Kansas City, Missouri School District specifically, and they determined that 30 years after Brown versus Board of Education, the Kansas City, Missouri School District is still segregated.
It's complicated because if you read the entire history of desegregation and read every single Supreme Court decision on desegregation, the court never actually defines what it means by desegregation. It never actually says, this is what desegregation means. And so it ends up being a little bit of a moving target. So then the question is, does desegregation require integration? So it was actually the Kansas City, Missouri School District that filed the case, and really they filed the case as a way of trying to go after the federal government, particularly the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. What they were saying was that the plan that was being forced upon them by HEW was going to increase segregation within the school district. Very quickly, though, Judge Clark ends up assuming control of the case. If you looked at his background, he was nominated by President Carter. There's nothing in his background where you would think this is some kind of wild-eyed judicial activist who's going to try to remedy all past evils or something like that. He decides that the school district should not be the plaintiff, that they would not reliably represent the interests of the students. So he realigned the school district as a defendant. And so now the KCMSD is a defendant, and then he said that all the children within the Kansas City, Missouri school district would be treated as a class of plaintiffs. And so then the question was, is anyone going to step forward to represent the students? And that's when Arthur Benson enters the picture. He steps forward to represent the students. He was a kind of a young, idealistic attorney there in Kansas City, a longtime member of, you could say, the Kansas City elite, but he also was deeply idealistic, and he wanted to make a difference. And he thought that this case was an opportunity to do something truly significant that would help the kids of Kansas City.
Around the period of Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, the city of Kansas City also annexed more land, so they acquired more land. But as the city expanded, the Kansas City, Missouri School District did not.
You have enclaves of suburban districts that formed outside of the traditional borders that at some point might have been Kansas City borders. Just like 85th Street, right on the other side, you have Center. Raytown, you have Hickman, you have Ruskin, you have all these school districts at one point where white communities and white flight were given the opportunity to abandon the inner city and go out to the suburbs and create their own little enclaves and cores of localized schools. So that abandonment gave a sense of isolation to the community that at one time was being more of a diverse community that should reflect the multicultural range of the needs of a public school system.
The Kansas City, Missouri School District, they had a plan as well. They wanted to combine all the school districts and everything into one in order to bring about equity into the Kansas City, Missouri School District. They would like combine like the Raytown School District, the Blue Springs School District.
Milliken versus Bradley was a famous case out of Detroit where the trial court judge there had created a massive metropolitan-wide desegregation plan, and it consolidated all the suburban school districts with the Detroit School District to create one massive district. It was unpopular. It probably contributed to George Wallace winning the 1972 Democratic primary in Michigan. Supreme Court ends up deciding it in 1974, and they said that you could not force suburban school districts to participate unless they participated in the violation. I think looking at the evidence, Judge Clark was right to say that they could not be included, and therefore he had to dismiss them as defendants in the case.
What they ended up doing was the magnet school program. They didn't take into account the neighborhoods that surrounded those newly rebuilt schools because they were crime infested, and crack cocaine had hit those areas. And so you have the crack epidemic taking place at the same time.
Yo. What's up? Oh, man. What was it like in 85?
85 was like in the beginning stages of the midst of the crack epidemic. So you had a lot of people whose life was turning upside down right before your very eyes.
Yeah, it was adults, kids.
Yep, adults, kids, it seemed like it just didn't have no mercy on no one. If you tried it, you was hooked.
And overnight, you could start seeing like...
It was literally like within a week. It's like from people being on top to just people strung out, standing on the corner.
So in the intervening years, after Milliken versus Bradley, several desegregation cases had emerged where they had created magnet schools. And this was seen as a way to try to attract white students to schools and then create some integration. What we learned from those small-scale magnet school programs, though, was that they weren't terribly effective. By 1984, we knew that they didn't work. And in fact, sometimes they made things worse. So Judge Clark is in a position where he has to do something, and under judicial rules, you have to do something that has a chance of working. So we know small-scale magnet school programs don't have a chance of working. Arthur Benson is staring at the same set of precedents. And you also have the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is pretty aggressive. So what they decided upon with the recommendation of expert witnesses was to create this massive magnet school plan where they turned all the high schools, all the middle schools, and half the elementary schools into magnet schools. And then also to pour resources into the schools. I mean, if you look at the schools that those kids were attending, You'd have schools with no heat, no air. You'd have holes in the ceiling. The kids of Kansas City were being done an injustice. It's almost criminal what was happening to those kids. First thing that was deeply controversial was that he ordered tax increases on both property owners within the KCMSD and everyone working within the KCMSD. There were all sorts of just implementation issues with that. That ended up being struck down. But the property tax stayed on the books, and in the end, Judge Clark more than doubled property taxes. No, not that I am aware of. I've not found where they've actually went and set a specific tax increase. It's tough to find that. So that was, again, an enormous exercise of power. Well, first he said that the Missouri and the KCMSD were joint and severally liable. And really, in practice, what that meant was that Missouri was going to have to pay the bulk of the cost of the remedial plan. However, he thought that the KCMSD and the people within the KCMSD should also have to pay. And so he increased the taxes in order for the KCMSD to be able to pay for its portion of the remedial plan. So yeah, the idea was we're going to gold plate this school district and it's going to attract all of these students from the suburbs. You know, the classical Greek theme at Central High School, which ended up being nicknamed the Taj Mahal because it was so finely appointed. We also had this athletic theme, so it had the indoor track, it had the Olympic quality gymnastics facility. I've been to the one in Colorado Springs and I've been to the one at Central High School. In my opinion, the one at Central High School looks better, but my understanding it was really never used because you couldn't get insurance for it. Southwest had the Model United Nations with simultaneous translation capability. There were petting zoos, they had a planetarium, or maybe more, maybe planetaria. Agribusiness was a theme at one of the schools. They were trying everything. They were trying everything, and they went out of their way to try to make it possible for white students from the suburbs to come. The judge ordered door-to-door taxi service for kids from the suburbs, and so it acquired the Field of Dreams as a moniker. If you build it, they will come, but very few came.
If you build it, they might come, but it's not for everyone.
If they wanna leave, let them walk away. It's a part of the plan. They don't understand. 'Cause it's bigger than you. It's bigger than you. So just tell them the truth. Gonna give them a view, yeah. I said it's bigger than you. They're gonna come asking for proof, yeah. So tell them the truth. I said it's bigger than you, yeah.
Lean not onto your own understanding, but put in that work.
I'm a successful return on investment. I'm a successful return on investment.
I'm a successful return on investment.
I'm a successful return on investment.
The magnet was just to attract white students.
Oh, really?
That was the entire reason that they invested the money.
Well, so that was on them for if the white students were attracted or the parents didn't want their kids in the inner city. Magnet schools were a success for students who attended, like a health magnet. You get it to where kids are coming in, oh, I want to be a nurse, doctor. They can come in and get that stuff early and get started. There was a lot of students who are getting like their CNA license before they even get out of high school. Nurses at 21, 22. I went to middle school. It's Paseo now, but it used to be Kansas City Middle School of the Arts. And I went there too. Did you? Yeah. That school was everything. With them putting that money into that school like that, it really prepared a lot of kids. And some of them are still doing that. Yeah. Using those talents they had from a middle school, carried it over to whether it was Paseo, whether it was Southeast. Yeah, it was a big sense of pride, especially at Southeast. Especially at Southeast. And that goes on to today. Southeast is where it's at. I am a successful return on investment. God damn it.
Well, if you're trying to, solve a problem or address an issue, you need to understand like what the core is, what's causing that issue, what problem are you trying to solve. But I think that's just an easy trap to fall into, where you're trying to match environments and you see another environment where that problem has been solved, and you're just kind of picking, little ornaments and saying, well, this will solve that problem, but you're not truly understanding the upstream issues of, where the problems lie. It's just not easy. Like, the easy thing is to build the fancy auditorium or the Olympic-sized swimming pool or the shooting range or like whatever the case may be, and just really a big waste. You have to understand who you're serving and interview those people and understand those people as best you can, and then your architecture needs to reflect that. You need to create spaces that help meet the people where they're at and what they need in their learning experience, and not prescribe it to them.
We were sent to Liberia, West Africa, to train teachers, African teachers. Those students were motivated, and they were motivated by the will to become better. And there the seed was planted, and it began to grow. Upon return to Kansas City, that's when I was sent to Pinkerton School. And that's when I met Ajama Webster and had many, many, many conversations about just the education of our children and how we could improve what was happening, especially with Black children, because the magnet schools, keep in mind, it was never to better the educational environment or anything for Black children. After I finished the year at Pinkerton, Dr. Garcia called me in one more time, and he said, I'm giving you a choice. You can be principal of J.S. Chick or a German magnet school. Even though I hadn't had any training. It was a no-brainer to me, because J.S. Chick was at the core of our community, and that's where I could make a difference for the children of our community.
There are parents in Kansas City who said, look, if Slavic studies is good for our kids, why not an Afrocentric school?
So then you had members of the clergy, you had members of the educational community, you had members of the business community, you had members of the activist community that started to engage and get together with these cross conversations to talk about a vision of excellence for the Black community. So they started to read, to research, to observe, and to study other programs and other processes that had a history or a legacy of excellence. And can we copy those traditions or use those as a model to build here locally within the Kansas City area?
And we all sat together brainstorming and talking about what it could be, what it could look like, oppositions, all those things.
And so they went to Judge Clark and to Arthur Benson and asked if they could create an Afrocentric school. And they were refused. And the reason that was given was that an Afrocentric school would not be desegregatively attractive. That was the phrase that was used, because that had to be the goal.
Can you translate not desegregatively attractive into layman's terms?
Yeah, so I think it is, to say desegregatively attractive, it just means, is it actually going to attract white kids? I think that's the simplest explanation for it. And the people who wanted the Afrocentric schools said, well, maybe that's not our primary concern. We're concerned about the quality of education for our kids who are already here, rather than some unidentified student in the suburbs who might want to come. So this was resisted. Eventually, Benson and Clark did approve. And that's, of course, interesting that so much authority over schools was being exercised directly by a federal judge and one attorney.
And there was a lot of skepticism from outside the community. And a lot of people didn't believe that an African-centered model or African-centered approach had legitimacy, that it would have fidelity to practice.
So they eventually did approve it, and you got the J.S. Chick School. And I think based on the performance of the students in that school, you could call it one of the best elementary schools in Missouri.
Not only did I have the opportunity to teach the children history about themselves, but I also learned through workshops that we had about the different people, that there's more than Martin Luther King, there's more than Rosa Parks that sat on the bus. There are so many things that African American people have done, can do, or continuing to do. And it gave the children the freedom to be themselves and also to learn about themselves, which I'm finding out is so stifled today.
If, I'm doing my genealogy and, my ancestors came over here in a boat in the hull as slaves and somebody else's ancestors came on the top of the boat as immigrants, that's two different experiences. So the educational system can't speak to one approach that's going to mesh those two into a unified process. When our ancestors were taken off the community of our continent, that was called the door of no return. So we wanted that generation of students, as they walked through that door, to know that they were returning back to a legacy. The way history was taught to me, my generation, it was from slavery to freedom. So we started with a deficit of slavery, and then we had to move toward freedom. We wanted that generation of students from J.S. Chick to know that their history superseded slavery, and that was only a 421-year period. That the legacy of cultural excellence, as I talked about going back to these Per Ankh schools, these places of light represent 3,000 or 4,000 years of consistent cultural greatness.
A lot of my students, some of them are engineers, some of them are teaching, and I like to say that it came from the teaching that happened at Chick and at ACE. And it makes a difference when you go into other districts, when you go to other schools, and you see that children really need that background. They need to know that they are appreciated.
Interestingly enough, though, the Board of Education, the superintendent, my director, were never a part of any of this. I didn't ask. And they were so busy pushing the magnet program, they didn't pay any attention to traditional schools anyway. They really didn't care what we were doing as long as we were quiet.
So what kind of emerged was that Chick was moving forward at its own pace. What exactly is going on over here where we have accelerated learning and achievement and community participation, business partnerships, collaborative interests where there's all these resources and wraparound support that's coming on board and all this excitement.
And the children, well, they loved it. They loved it.
As I came on board in 1998 as the district's coordinator for African-centered education, at that time, based on the DSEG plan, we had 4 standalone schools. J.S. Chick, K through 5, Sanford B. Ladd, K through 5, and Martin Luther King, which was designated as a middle school, and then we had Southeast High School that was designated to be the high school model.
I think they were very productive. I saw a difference in the children that started at Chick, started at ACE, and the children that integrated into ACE, you could see the difference. You knew those were not Chick babies. Those were children coming to get this program, but you could still see the discipline that needed to be done.
The problem with that structural plan, it did not provide the continuity based on a backward design. So therefore, as you left J.S. Chick having a full immersed K through 5th grade experience, you would go into Martin Luther King, which was also a feeder school for 6 to 8 other elementary schools. So in essence, what we found with our baseline research is that the students from Chick and Ladd only represented less than 10% of the school population. Our 4 years going into the Southeast, it was less than 5%. There was still a lot of questioning and confusion because the district had not achieved unitary status. It still had oversight from a DMC committee, which was the Desegregation Monitoring Committee.
And every month you'd have people from the school district brought before the DMC, and they would be excoriated for lack of progress on desegregation, and that meant attracting kids from the suburbs.
For me, it provided quite a bit of frustration because the timeline of getting things done became very complicated. And it was really difficult to lean into doing something that was reform-based or something that we knew would be dynamic but outside the scope of what the DSEG plan would relate to.
So there are a few other things that were controversial. So I think we have to say a little bit about that to get a sense of what happened. Since the white students didn't come, there were students who wanted to attend particular schools. And there were plenty of seats available, but they could not attend those schools because of the quota. For every 6 minority students in the school district, there had to be 4 white students. And Judge Clark refused to relax this quota. You actually had black parents listing their children as white to get them into their preferred school.
So the goal was to bring more white parents into the district. It wasn't necessarily to improve the quality of teaching and learning, but it was to meet the merits and the mandates of desegregating the school post haste.
So let's say you have 2 kids, one white and one black, and they both commit the same offense. There was suspicion, and I think not unreasonably so, that the student who becomes most valuable in that scenario, and the one who would make you look best if you didn't, say, expel the student, would be the white student. Because if you had fewer black students and more white students, all of a sudden your desegregation numbers look better. You just have many, many parents who are increasingly frustrated and think that now this remedial plan is not working for the benefit of the kids who are in the school district, particularly the African American kids. So in the end, it kind of becomes difficult to identify who's really benefiting, since the kids that were supposed to come weren't coming, and the kids who were there it wasn't front of mind for. So the CEJ, the Coalition for Educational Economic Justice, it forms to take over the school board because they'd become frustrated with the school board's lack of responsiveness to their concerns, because the school board was really working in alignment with Arthur Benson and Judge Clark. So then they end up taking control of the school board, and that ends up becoming significant because now the school board is going to be resisting the preferences of Arthur Benson. So then they kind of led the effort that did end up leading to the case ultimately being dismissed in 2002. This is something that I think is true around the country. It's not unique to Kansas City. What Arthur Benson said was there were actually studies that showed that if you implement these reforms, you can have dramatic increases in student achievement. He said the problem with those studies, though, is that no one had done any of them at scale. You would implement a reform maybe at one school or within a few classrooms, and you can see improvements there. But reforming an entire school district is something that's really probably beyond the capacity of any researcher to implement. Superintendents are famous for this. They'll come into a school district and say, we have the new solution that's going to solve the educational problems in this district, and they'll point to some research. And almost all of these studies show that they will work. But again, none of them show that you can do it at scale.
Once they saw that the magnet school program did not work, then you have the charter school system coming into play.
Started allowing charter schools 1999, 2000, and almost as soon as you get charter schools, you start to see another exodus of students out of the school district. Charter schools did lead to a significant decline in enrollment in the school district.
When kids have a safe place to learn and grow, and that space is designed in a way that fits their learning style, I mean, I think that brings kids back and wanting to stay in school, continue school, builds a focus, and gives them a lot more self-confidence and purpose. And I think a lot of the problems, these downstream problems of kids having issues later on in life are their confidence issues.
It was important to me that my son didn't go to Pembroke. It was important to me that he went to a school where his image, his self-identity, who he already is, was affirmed, not just in the curriculum, which would be great, but in looking around the building, in the staff and the students, in the culture, in the music that they play at the school dance. All of that was so important to me because I want my son to know and be proud of this community.
You know, there was a point in time where you weren't playing, you know, other people that didn't look like you. But now we go to these other schools and you're like, man, this place looks nice. Look, they have AC. Oh, look at all these fresh computers, like books that are brand new every year and chairs that are the right size for the people that are in that grade, right?
We all kind of just live in our little silos, but there are gymnasiums without air conditioning. And, you know, I can't fathom how you can train and develop with and concentrate on not having a heat stroke.
I don't know if you all know, but the last time we've passed a bond in KCPS, 1967. And why is that important? I see head shaking. It really is unbelievable. And the reason why that is so unbelievable is because most school districts, that is their primary mechanism for upgrading their buildings, taking care of the infrastructure. It's just what school districts do. And I think in many places, I don't think it's a whole lot of deep conversation around it. It's just understood. We're going to take care of our schools because we're going to take care of our children. We're going to make sure that they're in quality facilities so they can, the kind of teaching and learning that we know should happen is able to happen. The students have a sense of pride in their buildings. Staff feel good in the buildings. All of those things that come along with a bond. But we have not had those dedicated funds over the years to do the work that we need to do to our facilities.
I mean, if you leave a brand new building untouched for a year, even, like you're gonna have trouble. When you finally have enough funding and you're coming back around to update these buildings, it's gonna cost you way more than it would have had you just been maintaining the building. Because now you're talking about tearing a lot of things out, rebuilding versus small tweaks along the way.
People tend to think that students have to be deserving of an education, right? Deserving of a future, deserving of a clean, good school. But what have kids done, right? What have they actually done to deserve not having, you know, places of education, buildings that aren't dilapidated, right? Like we're talking basic maintenance is a lot of what this money is for because we kept deferring it.
What are the outcomes that you typically get when there's disinvestment? High school age students, middle school age students, 65% of the violent crimes. If we want to reduce violence in this community, if we're really serious about it, we have to invest in our schools and our children. Education is the answer. But if our children feel like they have no hope, because this is a matter of hope. If they feel like they have no hope, they're not going to make the best choices for themselves. And once again, we're not going to attract educators that can really support and work with our kids. And so if we want to see different outcomes in this city, I have people that talk to me a lot about the workforce. We want to have a strong workforce. Well, so do we. But there has to be investment. So we can't say we want these outcomes and then we're not willing to invest. The two go hand in hand.
So if our youth are hopeless and are lacking resources and chances and options, then they are forced to end up turning to a life of crime. That's how it impacts society. And the more crime you have, the less attractive the city is.
What happens when we don't invest in our youth?
I mean, I think we get a lot more of what you see now, which is this idea that education is not necessary, treating the education system more like a daycare than a place to actually learn. Or even parents, even understanding what happens on a day-to-day basis in their kids' life. All of those are interactions that make us better citizens, right? Working together. How do you work with each other? How do you live and exist with each other? A big part of where kids learn that is in school.
I mean, you have to be a hardworking teacher to teach in Kansas City public schools. You have to care in a real way. I know so many hard-working individuals who are putting in time and energy and talent above and beyond what they're getting paid to do to try to fill in some of the gaps that exist within the district, and the potential for what could be accomplished if they just had adequate books and resources and funding for their classrooms and trips and opportunities and facilities and smart boards and all the things is exponential. And I think it would drive a resurgence of people who see the Kansas City public school system as a great educational space for their children.
One day, we will have to stand before the God of history. We will talk in terms of things we've done. Yes, we will be able to say, we build gargantuan bridges to span the seas. We build gigantic buildings to kiss the skies. It seems that I can hear the God of history saying, that was not enough. But I was hungry, and ye fed me not. I was naked, and ye clothed me not. I was devoid of a decent sanitary house to live in, and ye provided no shelter for me. And consequently, you cannot enter the kingdom of greatness. If you do it unto the least of these, my brethren, do it unto me.